Hello, and welcome to the sixth episode of the RA Group Daily Webcast. Every weekday at 3:30, we host a daily webcast where a panel of experts discuss a wide range of topics to help you survive and thrive during the lockdown. This week, we will be discussing happiness techniques with Natasha Whitehead on Thursday and What is Wine with Leona Di Pasquale on Friday. Today, our senior nutritionist, Luxey Dayanandan, will be talking about how to keep active during the lockdown. Please feel free to ask any questions throughout the broadcast, as we would love to keep this as interactive as possible. Now, over to Luxey.
Hi everyone. So today I am going to be discussing ways in which to stay active. So as everyone knows, I suppose that we should be trying to stay active, but what exactly does that mean? So if we look at what the agenda is going to look like for today, I'm going to first start off by discussing what exactly are the health benefits of physical activity and why exactly do we need to try to stay active. I am then going to discuss how much physical activity is actually recommended, so what actually is the government guidance, and then I will be going on to talk about eating for exercise. So what exactly, what kind of nutrition you should be considering when you are doing any activity or training, and then finally resources to try to stay active and just some top tips. So moving on to what exactly are the health benefits of staying active and exercising. It probably comes as no surprise that there are numerous amounts of health benefits to staying active, many of them helping in which to lower the risk of developing a number of health conditions such as heart disease, type 2 diabetes, stroke, etc., helping you maintain a healthy weight, as well as building strong muscles and bones, and a number of psychological benefits, so helping to improve your mood, helping you feel energized, concentration, memory levels, is endless. And lastly, but probably most importantly as well, is helping to improve your sleep quality. Many of these you may have actually even noticed when you have been doing exercise or sports or activity, of how in fact it does improve your sleep or your energy or your mood as well. So what actually are the physical activity guidelines? So moving on to what exactly are the recommendations from minutes of moderate intensity activity a week. And so when we talk about intensity, this actually means walking or riding a bike, those types of level of movement. It also is equivalent to either doing 75 minutes of vigorous intensity activity a week. So when we talk about vigorous intensity, this is something that's a little harder. So when you're doing moderate intensity activity, it's getting your heart pumping and you start to feel a little warm, and you might even be able to say a few words without having to pause for breath. However, when you move on to vigorous intensity activity, so this is things like running, jogging, or sports, so playing football, netball, things such as that, you probably will struggle to actually be able to talk. You shouldn't be able to, because your heart's beating a lot faster and you're actually working at a much higher intensity. And research has shown that if you were to do 75 minutes of vigorous intensity activity, this can yield the same benefits as doing 150 minutes. So I guess, what does 150 minutes look like? So if you were to break that down across the week, that's looking at about 30 minutes on average a day, say. And again, it doesn't have to be a continuous amount of 30 minutes. It could look like breaking that down into maybe 10 minutes. So any bout of, say, 10 minutes of activity, where and when you can fit that within your day. So if you're, you do have you've got some time in the morning, trying to fit maybe a 10-minute activity or session then, and after lunch, just finding the ways in which you can fit that time in across your week. And then strength training activities. So it's generally recommended that we should be aiming to do these on at least 2 days a week, and this is mainly to help keep our muscles, bones and joints strong. So it's where It's activities looking at trying to work the big sort of muscle groups, so your sort of your legs, your chest, your hips, your core. So activities include things like yoga and Pilates, normal everyday activities such as carrying heavy shopping bags, mowing the lawn, lots of different things like that can count towards doing your strength training. And then probably the last point, which is again probably the most important, I would say, it's trying to reduce long periods of sitting down with some activity. So it will come as no surprise, as a nation, many of us are very sedentary and we spend long periods of time, hours even, exceeding sort of 7 to 10 hours sometimes a day, where we are predominantly sitting down. So it's trying to either, you know, set prompts or reminders where you get yourself up, you do some kind of activity. So whether that's you're trying to fit it in just before you're about to sit down, or taking your calls whilst walking, lots of little tips on how you can still keep moving. So moving on to eating for exercise. So this is very important as well. So how exactly are we fueling our body when we are doing any kind of exercise or training? It's important to mention, from the majority of us, if we're doing some level of activity, eating a well-balanced diet, you should be able to gain all the nutrition and essential nutrients and vitamins you need. But if you're exercising any more than an hour, it's probably worth taking some time to plan out your meals. So this is looking at what you're going to eat before, during and after your workout. So ideally before, you're trying to aim for sort of a high carb, low fat meal, and this is to top up your glycogen stores. So it's to make sure your body has enough carbohydrate, glycogen stores to actually fuel the workout that you're going to do. So meals such as, depending on when your training is looking like, so if it's in the morning, something such as porridge, or perhaps if it's around lunch you're going to be doing your training, a jacket potato with beans and salad. Those types of options can help with making sure you're having sort of a high carb meal. And then again for dinner, looking at things like a stir fry with like a lean source of protein. The aim is to try and eat between 1 and 4 hours before your training, to make sure that way the food is all digested and you're not feeling heavy and bloated before your actual workout. It's also important to make sure you top up your hydration levels to make sure you're completely fueled for the actual activity. Dehydration is one of the biggest things before doing a workout or a session, and symptoms you've probably even seen before if you know you've been dehydrated, dizziness, lightheadedness. So it's very important to make sure you do top up your fluid levels, so making sure you stay hydrated before the workout. During the workout, this really depends on how long your session is going to last. If it's going to last any more than an hour, then it's good to refuel with some carbohydrates. But if it's less than that, water would be sufficient. It's just topping up your fluid levels. But if it is going to last any longer, trying to refuel your body with some carbohydrates, so a small amount every further hour that you are training. So things such as dried fruit and cereal bars, something that's quite quick to have as a carb snack. And even if you eat, depending on how long you're doing it for, even things like an isotonic sports drink, many of which you can actually make at home yourself. So you can use a squash with water and a large pinch of salt to make your own, to hydrate yourself, to top up your electrolytes as well. And then finally, after, so your post-workout nutrition is very important to make sure your muscles recover properly. So this is to help with muscle recovery, replenishing your glycogen stores. So again, matching a starchy carbohydrate meal with some protein, and trying to fit in your vegetables in that meal as well. It's important to mention that if your post-workout meal won't be for some time following your session or training, then it's worth having a quick sort of carb plus protein snack if you're able to fit that in, ideally sort of within the first sort of 20 to 30 minutes post your workout. But then follow this up with your actual main meal for the end of your session. So, you know, something like a chili con carne with rice, or just where you've got your carbohydrates, you've got some protein as well, to make sure you're fueled and top up those carbohydrate stores. It's also worth mentioning that it depends on how often you train. So if you train several times during a day, you want to replenish the carbohydrates in your body quicker, so that way you're fueled for the session you're going to do perhaps in another couple of hours. But if you're, you know, training, doing an activity or sport for maybe once a day, then it's absolutely fine just to save that towards your evening meal.
Hi, Luxey. We have some questions from Daniel, if that's okay. Daniel
Yeah.
asks, if working on a calorie deficit with the aim to lose weight, then how do you plan meals around exercise? And is there any food group you should prioritize?
Yeah, great question. So if you're doing it, I guess, for an actual weight loss in particular, and you're actually looking at a calorie deficit, your entire diet, I imagine you're probably already looking at, predominantly it's looking at a 500 calorie deficit a day. So for a male, for example, if that's from 2,500 to 2,000 calories, I would say in that case, you should, I suppose, try to fit your post-work will include both those food groups, because if you're looking at it for a weight loss perspective, you also don't want to completely sort of drain out your energy, because you still want to be able to be fueled enough to carry on to do those levels of training and activity. But it could be maybe looking at just your portion size. So it might be you might want to reduce that carbohydrate content and maybe increase the protein slightly.
Fantastic. He also asked another question. This is going back to a previous point. Moderate intensity and vigorous intensity, are they defined by heartbeats per minute, which would then be defined by your BMI?
So, interesting question. So, moderate and high intensity exercise is actually defined. It's defined by the NHS, I suppose. So it's what they classify as activity. So yeah, it is based on your heartbeats per minute. It's not. It hasn't been quantified, but I suppose you could use it as it's where your heartbeat is very high. So for vigorous intensity activity, where that's where you're actually very short of breath and you wouldn't be able to, say a few words whilst you're doing that piece of activity. Whereas when you're going for a brisk walk, say, you could probably still maintain a level of conversation to some extent, but you probably couldn't, say, sing a song. So yeah, it can be used by heartbeats per minute, but it's not necessarily linked to BMI. And another category within sort of moderate intensity, vigorous intensity, and then there's very vigorous high intensity. So that's looking at things like your HIIT workout, so your high intensity interval training, and that's where it's very short bursts of high intensity activity. So that would be even further than that. But again, it's not for a sustained period of time.
Great. And then can I also ask about what your thoughts are on sports supplements?
Yeah, absolutely. So sports supplements are definitely very interesting. It's definitely an area in which a lot of people do spend a lot of money in, and quite an expensive sort of area in which you can quite easily spend a lot of money in. It does vary. I would say it depends on what level of training and activity you're doing. Most importantly being it's a sports supplement, a supplement to your diet. So it's something that can help supplement your diet. But if your diet ultimately isn't balanced, or you're not including all your food groups, you probably won't see much effect or reward, I guess, with taking such supplements. And it also depends on what level of training you're doing. For the average sort of person, if you're doing activity, or you're doing like an activity or exercise class once or 2 to 3 times a week, you're probably fine with your actual balanced diet to get all the nutrients, protein and essential vitamins that you need. But if you're doing an actual following a program, perhaps doing something along the lines of training for a triathlon, a heptathlon, you may want to consider that. And a lot of the time with sports supplements, I suppose it can be easier, it can be more convenient to have something that you're getting the guaranteed quantity of protein and carbohydrates, but it's still very possible to make that yourself. So for example, a chicken breast, for example, contains about 18 to 20 grams of protein on its own, so you could quite easily incorporate that into your meal. But I completely appreciate that it can also be quite convenient to put together a shake and easily consume that as well.
Fantastic, thank you very much. There's no more questions at the moment.
Okay, perfect. So I guess that brings me on to yes, so Sport England. So I'm sure many of us during this lockdown period have been inundated with the number of workout live videos, Insta stories, and everything at the moment about trying to get moving and doing a workout. So I thought this would be quite a useful piece to share. So Sport England have started a campaign called Join the Movement of Stay In and Work Out. And it's basically, the link's just there, so feel free to have a look. And what they do is they share a number of home workout programs from a variety of providers, so sort of gym providers as well as your YouTube PTs, etc., who can provide on-demand fitness content, and they either provide it for free or they've teamed up with Sport England to offer extended trials, and they just do a bit of a sort of a big they collate all of them, and you can just sort of scroll on there to find anything that really suits you. So they've got high intensity activity workouts, they've got categories for children as well, Zumba, dancing, all sorts of different types of activities that you can definitely give a try. So I just wanted to share that, so feel free to use. And equally, if you have any further information, we've got a host of information on our Nourish Life website, so please do visit. So anything from if you're just starting to become a runner and want to try out and want to know a bit more about how do you start your running journey, or how further to fuel your exercise and training. We've got some further details that I've discussed today, but a lot more in depth on the website too. And I'd also like to mention, if you do activity and actually it's not a problem for you, but perhaps it's the actual sedentary activity where actually you might need to try to move a bit more outside of those planned exercise sessions. It's just trying to get out and about doing stuff. So whether it's even in the home or an activity such as cooking dinner, that's standing on your feet, that's movement, it's doing something for a period of time. So it's just trying to find ways, really simple, quick ways, wherever you are in the home, to just get moving, whether that's even while you're waiting for the kettle to boil, for example, doing a couple of lunges or squats, or just anything to start getting that movement going, because it can be very easy to sit for very long periods of time and it's almost the end of the day and you've realised you haven't made any type of movement. So yeah, so that's probably my sort of top tips, I'd say, and if there's any other questions, please do ask. But
yeah, I mean, I've definitely been struggling in getting outside of the house. I'm just getting some fresh air and going for a walk. I think the current situation is encouraging people to just hide away all day long, every day. And, it's really important to get out there. I mean, what do you do as part of your day-to-day activities to keep fit?
Yeah, so I guess similar to you, Gavin, I do have bad days as well. Not to say every day is like this, but I quite enjoy running. So I try when I can in the mornings. I'm quite fortunate I have a park that's not too far away from me, so I do try to get out and go for a quick run. And I think exactly what you said to that, it really helps start up my day. Just getting fresh air, getting I guess, like you said, just getting outdoors and just getting a bit of different perspective, even when, especially now with the lovely weather, so just getting a bit of sunshine, just getting your heart racing, and I guess just sets me up for the day. So I try to do that. And equally, when I take any phone calls, or whether it's catching up with family or friends, whether that's FaceTime or any of the various apps we have at the moment, I try and walk whilst I'm having those calls. So whether that's walking up and down the stairs or in the middle of preparing a meal, trying to just get walking in where I can, because walking is probably the easiest thing to try and fit into your daily activity with minimal effort, no equipment required. So yeah, that's how I try to stay active when I can.
That's great. I've also got a question about illness. I mean, we've just got past the cold and flu season, and obviously there's a lot of people who may have been struggling with COVID-19. What is the recommended time in which to go back to exercising, and what kind of approach would you recommend for people who want to get back to their standards of health?
Yeah, that's a really important question, actually, and it's a really good point, because I would say if you've had any periods of illness, or like you said, if you've been sort of out of action, bedbound for quite some time, it's probably very important to make sure you don't throw yourself straight back into your perhaps quite a highly active or fitness routine that you may have done before, so just because it's giving your body enough time to recover. And equally, it could be quite detrimental to your health if you were to go back at sort of full pace into a very heavy routine that your body's not quite ready for yet. So I would suggest any periods of illness or anything such like that, definitely take your time with it and perhaps just gradually build that up. So maybe it might even have to start with something like a sort of gentle walk for maybe 15 to 20 minutes, and then you slowly build that up. But definitely do take the time to make sure your body is fully rested and you are back to your optimal health before attempting that, because yes, very good point, you could quite easily set yourself back by going in too early.
That's great. We've got a few questions coming through. Sarah asks, are there any good websites for a 10 to 20 minute workout, particularly for those who are slightly less agile?
Yes, absolutely. So the NHS website actually has a number of 10-minute workouts. They have a number that you can do from, I believe it's even from your couch, and all sorts of different little 10 minutes, ideally for those types of individuals. So I would recommend if you go onto the NHS website, even if you put in exercise, it comes up with a whole range of activities. They've got a lot of strength and tone videos as well. So it's just looking at actually in terms of just getting moving, but also building up that strength again back into your muscles, and your bones, of stretches and things such as that. So I would suggest definitely try that one out initially.
Great. Daniel writes in again, there are a number of fitness myths. What would be some of the biggest which you can debunk?
That's a very good question. There are a number of fitness myths. So let me think. I think one of the biggest ones, I think, is the more protein you have, the more muscles you build. And that's always been one of my favorites, because it's something that I hear time and time again, across all age groups, funnily enough, and all different demographics. And that is one to debunk, because the body, in terms of your protein intake, as a nation anyway, majority of us consume far more protein than we actually need. And a very good point to mention here is your body can't actually store any excess protein. So if you are consuming large levels of protein, once your body has used it for what it needs, any excess is actually excreted. So if you are spending lots of time, resource, and quite potentially money on buying lots of protein supplements or protein-rich foods, it may in fact be a waste of money, because your body will not be taking in any of it once it's had its required amount. So if you want to work out what that looks like, there is a calculation, and it's something along the lines of, I think it's 0.75 grams of protein per kilogram of weight. So you times that by how much you weigh, and that will tell you how much protein you need that is sufficient for you. So that's probably one of my biggest ones, I think, in terms of a fitness, debunk.
Fantastic. And Sonia asks, although I seem to be walking a lot, it's still not as much as I'm used to. Should I be thinking about reducing my food intake during the lockdown?
Really good question. And it does vary. I would say individual to individual, it will really vary. For example, for Sonia, for that example, where you find that you're actually not doing as much activity, quite possibly you probably could. However, for someone else, it could be the very opposite of, well, actually they're moving more than they used to before, because there's so much more to be doing around the house, or they're just having to do a lot more on their feet. So I would say in terms of your calorie consumption, the guidelines from sort of the Eat Well Guide and government recommendations for sort of the average female is around 2,000 calories. But if you were looking to cut that down, I would say a 500 calorie deficit of that is absolutely fine. It's something that helps with maintaining healthy weight loss. But equally, perhaps it's just looking at your portion sizes. So perhaps you might want to just try to have frequent meals, 5 to 6 meals across the day, as opposed to your sort of standard breakfast, lunch and dinner. And that might just help modulate your energy levels as well, if you feel that you're actually not moving as much. But alternatively, you could try and increase your activity as well. So whether that's trying to, try and do a bit more, perhaps do another workout video, or try and do another class to try and up those exercise activity levels too.
Great. And then Alice has wrote in, she said, how often should I aim to stand up from my desk? What's a good, very short movement burst in between calls?
Very good question. So I would say I try to aim for every 30 minutes. So every 30 minutes, you can even put a reminder or timer on your phone or your laptop to try and get up from your desk. And I would say a good activity to do, if in that time you've got the time, is to either do a walk around the room or to try and do some lunges and squats. So even if you can do sort of like 10 or 12 in that time, and if you can fit in 2 sets, that's even brilliant. But even if it's something as quick as that, I think would be great. Or even if you've got some stairs, going up and down the stairs in that time, just something quite quick. But if you're needing to do it from your desk, I would suggest squats and lunges, because that's quite a quick one to sort of fit in those sort of 5 minutes every sort of 30 minutes or so.
Fantastic. And then our final question is from Daniel. He says, what is the difference between aerobic and anaerobic exercise?
Aerobic and anaerobic exercise, that's a very good question. So it's my understanding of it is, which I will double check, but it is based on what actually you're producing. So with aerobic activity, I guess it's in terms of the lactic acid buildup that you're building up. So with aerobic activity, where your heart rate is pumping and your heart's getting faster and you're getting on warmer. But with anaerobic activity, my understanding, it's usually when there's a lactic acid buildup, when there is an excess. But I will probably check that one because I haven't looked at that one before, so I can definitely double check that for you.
Great. Alice has got back in touch saying, I'm lunging and squatting during our calls now. That's the winner.
Glad to hear it.
And then we've just got a couple of last questions come through. I've injured my knee while cycling. Have you any suggestions on best ways to keep active whilst I'm slightly less mobile than usual? And that's from David.
Okay, so injury while cycling, I'd say probably best in that case. If it's an injury, I'm guessing you're probably looking to avoid using that sort of knee region at the moment. So perhaps trying to do stretches or your upper body in terms of your arms. So trying to do some simple stretches, maybe just going along the sort of strengthening approach instead. So something where it's sort of isolating that knee instead, I would suggest. But equally, perhaps just looking at something that's just using your body weight. So as opposed to doing anything that's using any assisted weights, just using your own body weight to do some kind of strength activity, that might help to just strengthen your body first whilst your knee's recovering. Great.
And then Caroline has a very quick one, says, why do I feel more tired even though I'm doing less physically?
That's a really good one. So that's something I would say the vast majority of us probably at this period of time can quite easily relate to. And a lot of that is probably a multiple number of things, such as your routines completely changed. You're probably, quite possibly, you might have changed your eating habits as well. Your activity levels might have been fluctuating. And even though you're doing activity, it might well have a number of different factors affecting still feeling slightly lethargic. So it could just be, even if you're not getting out, you're not getting fresh air, you're not getting consistent sort of your meal times are slightly changing in terms of how often you're consuming your meals, and also perhaps some stresses, external stresses as well. You might now be in an environment where before perhaps your sort of workspace or your sort of stay at home would have been quite peaceful, but if you've got other external factors, other people now in that space, a lot of that can definitely sort of interrupt your stress levels as well. And I think probably a number of those mixtures together, and also your sleep. So sleep is something that's definitely very important, and we will be touching on that next week in more detail. But just looking at, are you getting adequate sleep as well? Are you doing other activities to sort of stimulate your mind as well?
That's great. We do have some more questions, but we're going to get back to those people after the broadcast, if that's okay. I just want to say thank you very much, Luxey, for a fascinating discussion. Our next webcast will be on Thursday at 3:30 with Natasha Whitehead, talking about how to embrace happiness techniques. For more information about our programme of discussions, please go to RA Group's website at www.ragroup.co.uk/news to download the broadcast links and some of the recipes. Meanwhile, if you have any questions or suggestions about how you can get involved, please email gavin.goody@ragroup.co.uk. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Goodbye.